Truck driver saves unconscious girl. Then he sees her ID. Leo couldn't help but sigh as he drove through the slippery snow. He was returning home after a difficult shift. He had been driving for several hours now and his eyes were starting to close, but a strange figure on the road quickly caught his attention. It was a woman. He immediately pulled over and went down to see if the person needed help. At first glance, the woman was splayed out, not moving. His breath began to quicken. He frantically searched for a pulse but couldn't find one. However, he did notice something strange about her ID that made him step back. Leo had a long and tiring day. His job was tedious and sometimes he wanted to give up, but he knew that he had to do this so his family could have a better life. They were in a dire financial situation and Leo was always worried about money. He never imagined this life for himself. Each day of driving seemed as uneventful as the last and Leo wished for a change. Well, he got his wish, but it was not what he expected. Also, if you have not done so already, please subscribe to our channel and click that notification bell to get inspired by these real-life stories every day. Now, back to the story. As he drove back home, Leo was deep in his thoughts. He thought about his baby girl at home. Leo was so worried about her health. He and his wife had made a recent discovery that left him heartbroken. They'd been back and forth to the hospital over the past few weeks. Eventually, after running numerous tests, the doctors had broken the news that the little girl's health was deteriorating and her days were numbered. The doctor told Leo and his wife that their daughter was diagnosed with cyst formation. She needed an operation, but it was so expensive. They were even told that she would only last for 3 years if the treatment wasn't done. Leo almost lost his mind when he learned about this. He and his wife were even more desperate when they found out how much they'd have to pay for the operation. When the doctors told Leo and his wife the astronomical price for it, the couple felt worried. How would they save up that much in 2 years? Leo promised his wife he would do whatever it took. He asked his boss for extra shifts and was often driving late into the night. That's when he came across the unconscious woman. Because of the snow on the road, visibility was zero. He reduced his speed to a minimum and drove cautiously up to the neighboring settlement. The lights from his truck were the only thing visible on that road, and he wondered if his eyes were playing tricks on him when he saw a silhouette on the side of it. Leo slammed on the brakes, unsure of what was happening. The figure in front of him looked like a woman, and what's more, it seemed like she wasn't breathing. The incident completely snapped Leo out of his troubling thoughts. Panic and fear seized him, sweat dripping from his forehead. He wasn't sure what to do, so he did the only thing he could think of. Lady, what's wrong with you?" Leo called out of the driver's seat window. He was still afraid to get down from his truck because he wasn't sure about the whole situation. However, he received no answer from the woman and he was even more concerned. So he decided to come down and see what happened to her. He took some careful steps until he came to where she was lying. That's when he noticed it. The woman's ID was lying on the ground next to her, and when he saw what it said, Leo felt scared. Still, he had to try and save her. At first, Leo couldn't find a pulse, but then almost like a bolt of electricity had hit her. The woman's eyes began to open a little. Leo let out a breath of relief, all thoughts of the ID vanishing. "Lord girl, get up! Get up, let's go to the hospital." Leo tried to help her up, but he could also tell she was in bad shape. He wondered what had happened to her. Leo was so worried for her well-being that he scooped her up and brought her to his vehicle. He turned on the heater to the highest setting to heat it as fast as possible. She'd been lying in the snow for so long and Leo hoped she would be okay. He handed her his jacket because she was only wearing a t-shirt. He then drove as swiftly as he could to the hospital. All thoughts vanished from his mind except getting this girl the help she needed, something he wished he could do for his own daughter. After a while, the unconscious girl started sitting up in her seat. She recovered a little and color started flooding her cheeks again. A few moments later, she was able to say some words, but it was barely a croak. Leo frantically asked, "Can you hear me? What's your name?" Her answer came out in a whisper as, "Emily." When she said that, Leo had a strange feeling in his chest. She somehow looked vaguely familiar to him, but he had more pressing questions. "Can you tell me how you ended up here?" Leo inquired. "It's a terrible story. It would be best if you didn't know," she responded, sounding close to tears. However, Leo was concerned that he'd have to inform the hospital that he discovered her on the side of the road. And what if they called the authorities? The cops may have more inquiries. He gently told her that it was preferable if she told him everything so he could help her out. Having a daughter, Leo felt instantly protective of the young woman. According to Emily, her husband and several other guys abducted her from her house. She said that things had gone astray once she told her husband about her company going bankrupt. But her story sounded a bit far-fetched. Leo decided not to say anything. Apparently, her husband reacted negatively towards the news and started punching and kicking her until she was down. Because of his anger, he decided to get rid of her. Emily said she was able to escape and felt grateful to be alive. Leo thought carefully about what she said before responding. Why would her husband go to such drastic measures over a bankrupt business? In all his years, Leo had never heard a tale as strange as this. But then he remembered how Emily had looked lying in the freezing snow. He couldn't believe they'd done such a terrible thing. In his heart, he felt awful for Emily. He hoped she would be okay after this, both mentally and physically. But Emily had a massive secret of her own. They were at the medical center within an hour. Leo rushed her to an ambulance where the physicians did everything to ensure that the girl would not suffer further harm. He almost sighed with relief, but it was inevitable that the doctor would ask him some questions and he wasn't quite sure what to say. He was informed that it was necessary to admit the young lady to the hospital. She had frostbitten limbs and in general needed medical attention after spending so much time in the streets. "Tell me, are you her husband or brother?" the doctor asked. Leo knew that he had to tell the truth, but he wasn't sure what would happen when he did. Leo told the doctor that he wasn't actually related. In fact, he didn't even know her last name. He narrated the story about finding her on the street, and Leo also told the doctor what Emily told him. Alerted by what he heard, the doctor asked Leo if he already reported it to the police. Leo of course said no, he'd just been focused on getting the girl to the hospital. Leo was well aware he'd be subjected to questioning, but because he was mindful of what had occurred to her, he wasn't concerned. He would just explain that he happened to come across her on the way and hoped it'd be the end of it. So it came to pass. When the district officer arrived, he began questioning Leo. The officers accepted the story and allowed Leo to leave, but he didn't know this was far from the end of the story. Leo was sent home because he couldn't help any more than he did. He was greeted by his wife and daughter, who were worried about his later-than-usual arrival. Leo told his wife everything that had happened to him, including the entire tale of Emily. She calmed him, stating that it was a good thing he'd discovered the girl. Leo's wife felt he was a hero since you never know what may have occurred if he didn't found her. However, she also had some disturbing news. His wife comforted him about what happened, but she soon told him the bad news. Their daughter's condition was deteriorating daily and the situation had become dire. His wife told him how worried she was and he couldn't help but feel the same. With thoughts of his daughter flooding his mind, Leo was surprised to get a call from the hospital in the morning. It turns out Emily had requested to see him. Leo was surprised but quite pleased to hear from the girl. It also momentarily took him away from his own troubles. Emily wanted to thank her savior personally. Of course, Leo went to the hospital because he knew that the young lady also needed some support. Emily couldn't help herself, thanking Leo again and again. She didn't know what would have happened if he hadn't passed by that road and taken her to hospital. Leo told her that it was fate and he was sure someone else would have stopped if not him. Still, she insisted that he deserves all of her praise. He was also shocked when she brought up another topic. It turned out that the nurses told Emily about Leo's situation. She began to ask him how his daughter was doing. After the initial surprise, he told her that his little girl's condition was getting worse daily and she needed an operation. He was so immersed in his story that he even got to the part about why he has to drive in the middle of the night to earn more money. It felt nice to share his thoughts with someone. He was always the one comforting his wife and daughter. Leo was in a foul mood as he left the hospital that day. He was aware he'd helped someone else, but he couldn't help his own daughter. The money he saved was still insufficient to cover the cost of the procedure, and time was running out quick. If only I could do something more, he thought. Leo didn't hear from Emily again. He never got her contact details, but he hoped the young woman was doing good. Leo had other things on his mind. He couldn't afford to waste time because his daughter's life was at stake. He tried to find another job even though he was already working himself to the bone. Leo and his wife desperately needed the money. Unfortunately, Leo couldn't find anything. As time continued passing by, Leo became more and more desperate. What could he do to help his girl? He was close to having a breakdown. Just when Leo felt that all hope was lost and he'd have to accept the situation, his phone rang. Who could this be? Leo hoped it was finally some good news. "Hello, am I speaking to the family of Kate Scott?" the caller asked. Even though he was bewildered as to why someone was inquiring about his daughter, Leo answered, "Yes. Why, might I ask?" It turns out the caller was the hospital's chief physician. He had news for Leo. The man began to worry. Whenever the hospital called with information about his daughter, it always seemed so bad. The doctor informed Leo that a transfer, the amount of money needed for his daughter's operation, had just come in. "I'd appreciate it if you could come to the hospital today to finalize all the arrangements and schedule the surgery," the doctor said when Leo didn't answer. He was speechless. Who could have helped him with such a large amount of money? Surely this had to be a mistake. What money? Leo inquired. I honestly don't know. The money had been transferred and is currently in our account. He was also told that the transaction request had been prepared and was ready for processing. The doctor responded patiently to his questions, but he still had plenty of unanswered ones. How could anyone be so kind to them? As far as he knew, not many people knew about their situation. Leo and his family went to the hospital, although he couldn't figure out what was happening. His wife was grateful and also amazed at the same time. Little Katie was taken away on the same day as the doctors began preparing for the surgical procedure. Everything was done in 2 days. The parents were so happy when their daughter was finally free from her illness. She was now going to have a normal life like any other young girl her age. She was all smiles as if she also knew that she would finally enjoy her life to the fullest. Still, Leo was bothered about one major thing. All Leo's inquiries with the hospital had come to nothing. They still couldn't find out where the money for the operation had come from, and it bugged Leo. He wanted to express his gratitude to this person. Now that he was no longer worrying about his daughter's health, Leo gave all his attention to finding this kind stranger. Leo and his wife called everyone they knew and asked them if they sent help, and all of them said no. Their daughter's lifesaver remained a mystery. As they sat there beside her hospital bed, they hoped that the generous person would be blessed. Little did they know that the very same person was about to visit them in the hospital. When Leo looked up, he was surprised that a familiar woman entered his daughter's hospital room. When the lady came nearer to them, he was even more amazed to see recognized it was Emily. She looked different now. She looked ragged that day of the incident, but now she was dressed like a wealthy CEO. Emily smiled at them as she came closer, and Leo's mouth dropped open. His wife greeted the young woman, but Leo noticed something else. It was the ID she was wearing, and boy, he was right. She was an owner of a famous firm. No wonder she looked familiar to him on the day he saved her life. That's when he pieced the puzzle together. Leo walked over to her and shook her hand when his wife and Emily were done introducing themselves. Without delay, he asked her if she was the one who helped their daughter. She shyly said yes. It was a repayment to Leo for saving her life when she needed help most. There are always instances like this in life. Sometimes by helping someone out without expecting in return, fate will reward you. It may even happen at the time you least expect it. Therefore, always be kind and helpful to anyone who needs it. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up and consider sharing it with someone who may find it interesting. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.